I could never believe I could fly.
I believe I can fly.
Yeah. Ooh, no,
it takes practice, like most anything, you know. Like you have to train and try it consistently, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Do you ever dream about like a project you're working on, or art, or something you're trying to figure out?
No, but I used to be when I started working as a programmer when I was still a university student. I would solve all my most complex problems while I was sleeping, and then I would wake up and I would have the solution in my head.
That happened often?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was working at a company where I was doing like some industrial programming for managing stocks in an import-export company.
Okay.
And every time I would have a big problem, like big algorithmic problem or mathematical problem, then I would drop it, go to sleep eventually, and then the next morning I'd have the solution. I'd figure out the problems to it.
You just see it in your mind? You knew exactly how to approach it now?
It's as if I was working while I was sleeping. It like you're trying to make the most of it, like make every moment count. Mm-hmm. But no,
were you more tired in the morning?
I think no, it's actually relaxing because your brain is not focused on the problem and you're thinking about other things, or you're relaxed about it, and then the solution comes up more easily. When I was studying in philosophy and cognitive sciences, and I had this logics class, and it was the same thing. I would do all my homeworks. These were like problem-solving homeworks, and then the ones I wouldn't be able to work out, I would go out, get drunk, smoke weed, whatever, and then I would find the solutions after that because I stopped focusing on them, and my brain would probably try to consider different approaches that were not part of the ones I would think that would work. Mm-hmm. And most oftentimes I would find the solution then.
Yeah, I think your brain needs a good deal of rest, like processing time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what Einstein used to do when he was working for hours and hours on a formula or whatever. He'd go out and row his boat, in the pond for 2 hours. And he said it was like, that's when
or the classic
voice
walk
would come to him.
Yeah,
go for a walk, clear your head. So that was when you were working for a coding company. You were coding for a company.
Yeah.
So does that still happen to you in a creative sense with art?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I still work. I code most of my stuff. Well, all of my stuff is I either code it or my colleague partner works on them too. And it's the same thing. Sometimes I would have intense problems, algorithmic problems I would work on, and then I have to find out a solution to figure out how to deal with them. And sometimes when I sleep, but nowadays I try to, cut off and not be immersed into these things all the time.
You set boundaries for how much you think about it. Yeah, because it can get a little maddening, or like you go a little crazy when you're living in this conceptual world of
the thing is that it feels sometimes like when you're an artist, it's as if you're always an artist. It's like if I'm a plumber, I go work my plumbing, blah blah blah, I do that, and then when I get back home I disconnect from it. And when you're an artist, these things, because they're very personal, you always think about them, you talk about them with people and so on, but you still need to have this moment where you're actually doing either like not that it's not fun to do art, but you need to do fun the things that are oisives, like that are just leisure or unrelated to you.
Yeah, you got to punch the clock sometimes. You got to punch out and take a break, think about other things. Yeah. And I think it will probably inform your art better too. Yeah, because I think you're probably more susceptible to inspiration when you're not totally focused on something else.
Yeah.
Because it's very inspiring to be surprised as well.
Yeah, of course. And a lot of the great ideas come up when you're actually not thinking about them or trying to figure them out. What these new project would be. It's like things that come up kind of randomly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find that is your time? Because I mean, there's a lot of programming, a lot of work. A lot of when you move one of your exhibits, that's a ton of work, and then accounting, and then managing your business, and it sounds like there's tons of responsibilities. Mm-hmm. Does that ever do you get periods of reprieve from that? And if like where, you know, say like a tour just ends and you have like a month off, or if you ever have enough, my question is if you ever have enough time off and then these new inspirations, is that like when they come to you?
No, I'd say that like I always take time off because I have kids, so I take the time to hang out with them and just do play around, go out, do whatever, and also do vacation stuff, like typical vacation. I go out to surf and to the beach with them or in the woods and stuff like that. And oftentimes this is more a moment where I think about life in general and not art in general. But a lot of the ideas come when for example, when we're on our tour. It's not when the tour is done. It's in these moments where you're waiting. Let's say you're in an airport and you're waiting for 2 hours, and then I start to talk with my colleague more, and then this is where we get good at doing art problem solving, not technical problem solving, but thinking, let's say we want to do an AV performance. What could be fun? And then we're thinking about funds. We're not thinking about problematics. How can we solve this specific problem? Or how can we do visuals that would feel immersive, although they're projected onto a screen? It's like this is the free time where you're able to let your mind wander and think about anything, whether it's possible or not. And then you go back to the drawing board and figure out how these things can be made into possible project.
We can't get 40 elephants. Okay, well, we'll scrap that from the plan. Yeah. But yeah, the problem-solving stage. But yeah, those stages of an idea and like nurturing this idea, and where you don't really constrain yourself. Those are super, super fun.
Yeah.
Moments. That's like songwriting. Like when you write a song, when you get the first idea for a song, there's like this burning joy you feel for like the first 10%, and then the rest of it is just
a lot of it has to be fun, you know. I don't know how what other term I could use to better describe that in English, but it has to be something that's devoid of any specific interest or any specific goal setting. You know, you have to let like you're saying, you have to let your mind wander off and imagine anything. And then you organize this into something that makes sense to produce. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of has to come from your, like you were saying, like when it's a very personal thing to be an artist. And sometimes you can't turn it off. But it kind of has to come from the most personal parts of your mind. Very, like your unconscious mind, you know? And so a lot of composers had quotes about this, about like how when they would compose, they'd be in like this kind of space in between consciousness and unconsciousness, or dreaming and waking. And that's when all their ideas would come to them. Now, and poets and stuff, a lot of them just did opium, you know, and that they'd get there quicker. But that's very interesting. And how much dreams can affect your like artistic creativity or ideas or whatever. I'm super interested in stuff like that. I think a lot of artists, I'll speak from my point of view, a lot of musicians, like we're in this period of like technicians, and not a lot of, I'd say like conceptual innovation, or like what you can possibly do from like the pop music side. Like, but you see a lot of like academic music that is super innovative. There was just this great festival called the Montreal New Music Festival, or the M&M Festival, which I could be confusing to some people, I guess. But, and all the compositions that I went and saw were that seemed breathtakingly complicated to make, and all dependent on you being physically in the room, like unrecordable performances. Do you notice like a change in installation art or performance art or over the years, like that it's less about proving that you can be like a good technician, but you have to have like a very focused idea that's apparent?
I'll just put this back.
Oh yeah, it's a bit saggy. I think we get a good mic stand in this studio eventually.
All right, that's better.
Yeah, it'll be upstanding.
You were asking if I think that there's like what the focus is on more.
Do you find like in because now like the possibilities for installations are so crazy. Like you can develop such an immersive experience in a space for, you know, what 50 years ago would have been millions of dollars. So I think in music, I noticed particularly like more of it being about like building things or more about like the technique.
Yeah.
But now I think we're almost so far past like being like, we just have such good technology that can do all these technical things so well for us that I think we're at a period where the concepts and the ideas have to be like so radically unique.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. In my specific domain, being more the digital arts, performing or installation building, I think we're kind of more of in a golden age of production. So there's very specific categories of productions that are made. So, and we're still in some kind of a conceptual phase of it. So it's often an idea, a very simple idea, but nice, like usually very clever idea that's being instantiated by technology. And a lot of the artists are having their stuff made by a bunch of different people, like, you know, the robotics, the electronics or whatever. So it's much less about the, especially in performance, the being all together and something happening that is not, you know, reproducible, and more about creating images or specific states of being, of matter and people together. And to me, it's not something that I am particularly interested in, because it feels still very representational or very staged in a way. So I would tend to have the opposite approach, where I'm trying to think about how we can use technology, use elements, physical elements or electronic elements, into putting people into a state where that wouldn't be reproducible in any other types of situation. Okay, so it's kind of giving to that specific experience a lot of value. So there's always a very strong conceptual background behind it, a strong idea that guides the process of production. But this is not satisfying enough for me, you know. If that were the case, I could just read about it and be, you know, mind blowed the same way.
Yeah.
So I want the experience of the installation to blow your mind even further off, so that you have this added value of going into the physical space and experimenting the art. Right.
And and those are the feelings that I really enjoy with art, is that's the only place you could get that feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you were telling me about I looked at the video as well, but your spinning installation.
Yeah.
What's that called again?
The objective internet.
The objective internet. That it's hallucinatory almost. Like it changes you in so many ways.
Yeah.
So I get what you're saying about what your intention is.
Well, one of the intention behind it, apart from all the conceptual aspects, was to have people experience a sense of the solution of themselves. And because it works with mirrors that reflects your own image, and it turns very slowly at the beginning, you see yourself very, you literally see yourself. So you see your own image turning around yourself. But as it goes faster and faster and the lights change and they turn around you, the opposite direction or in the same direction, the flicker, your own image is being fragmented into all these light parcels, and as the speed increases, you have a sense of depth in the image. So it's almost like abstract like video art from the 80s. It's something that blows your mind, but it's all around you, and it's only composed of your own image. So you have this feeling of being blown up into this sidereal space, like an espace sidéral, like being blown up into this cosmic space,
spreading apart.
Yeah.
So they see their image, and then it kind of slowly disfigures, and then just.
Yeah.
And what are they hearing?
There's music. Actually, the way the sound is composed, there's piezo mics, like contact mics on the installation. So all the installation is made out of aluminum tubes, so they're hollow, and we're recording the actual sounds that are emitted by the mechanical sounds of the piece that's turning, and we're refeeding it through a driver into the piece, and then we're recording it and shooting it through two speakers that are turning on the disc. So essentially the sound, there's some synthesis sound that's made, and there's a pre-recorded quote of a blogger who's speaking and saying how her life became a commodity. But most of it is the sound of the actual machine. So just like for the image that is composed essentially of your own face,
You in the space.
the sound is essentially the sound that comes from the installation and is fed back to you. So it's kind of like a big feedback loop. And there's a Doppler effects because everything is turning, as I was explaining earlier on, like both virtually, the sounds virtually are spinning, and physically because the speakers are spinning. So your whole auditory visual experience is something is like a big turning mess, or big spinning experience.
It sounds like chaos. Like it sounds like it sounds very mind altering.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, that's what we get from people. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's short term, and it's not like it is having a somatic effect. Like people report sweating a lot or feeling very hot, most probably because they're unconsciously reacting to all this stimuli. Yeah. But yeah, it is creating this kind of hallucinatory experience.
Yeah. Do you have so that's a very unique art piece. It's because it's like one person does it at a time. Mm-hmm. I looked at some of your other work, and it's like the one where everyone is directed through the city by robot voices.
Yeah.
And like the idea of audience in your work is pretty interesting to me because. Yeah, coming up with a way to reach people with all of these very, very, because you want them to have a very intense, connection with being at the place.
Yeah.
So do you find that you try and do that more with individuals, like at one time, or like what's the biggest scale of project you've wanted to do that you thought was worth trying to do, like to try and affect as many people at once?
Well, it's in the end, it comes down to a matter of resources, like how much gear you can, or how creative you can be with using a limited amount of resources, technological resources to affect the most people. In projects like that, it's bringing people back to their own selves and their own experience of the art. So in this project, which is called Cortège, where people are walking around the city with these headphones, we're trying to make them have a different look at other people, but also at their surroundings. And it can work with one person, but it can work with 100% at a time. Like whatever, it depends on how much the server can handle. When we launched the project, I think there was close to 100 people at the time working it out.
Yeah, that's huge.
And like a funny anecdote that came out of this is one of the developers, because it was the first time we worked with different developers for the actual app and the back end. And he was talking at a tech geek conference with the makers of Pokemon Go, which deals with a lot of people. And there was we want to do bigger interaction with a lot of people in between themselves, and we're not there yet. We're still waiting for the tech, for the proper tech, the proper phones, phone technology to do that. So that's one of our limitation with this project is we're actually. How much people can use this at the same time, or how many people, to what extent can you make people connect to one another? So this could be seen as one of the projects where we try to have as many people as possible. Yeah. But, we already had started to tackle these issues in the past, like in the 2011. And so when we built Cinetos, which is huge metallic ceiling that's 30 feet by 40 feet, something like that, that drops down onto people. And the aim was to develop a performance that had physicality to it. So because you're confronted with a huge metallic ceiling coming down onto you and making you crouch onto the floor. And we could only enter maybe 100 to 150 people maximum. But all the people were experiencing the same kind of distress or anxiety, being, not knowing what's going to happen, but knowing that they're going to be brought down on the floor. And one of the ideas we had about this project was to actually develop a piece where multiple people could interact or, feel connected to the art to the structural aspect of the art form. So it's kind of in between an installation piece and a performance piece, because it's a space shaping device.
Yeah.
So we're in this room and everything is kind of shrinking down onto us. So that was part of our researches into making, at that time, like most performances, like group performance, were more statistically based. So you had, like not a phone with a device, and you select something and this will alter the course of the performance, like the visuals or anything like that. We wanted to have something that was very somatic, so something that physically forces people to be closer to one another and to take position or take a stand in regards to that thing that's coming down on us.
Yeah, and it really does something that else that's interesting, is it makes them part of the art piece, because the people will have to move. It'll have to change. Yeah. And it'll change everyone else's experience simultaneously.
Yeah, and part of the narrative of this experience is not only what you're looking at, because at the beginning you're looking at it and as it's far away. But as it's brought down closer, you're paying attention to your own body sensations and to others people. You're starting to feel other people's anxiety or their stress level. And so everyone's interacting with one another, and there's often times some crazy person, like there were shows where some guy tried to fight the system and stand up, and everyone's looking at him. So now the story is not about something we stage, it's something about that person's specific reaction to our installation or to the performance, and this becomes the story or the narrative of the performance. There are other cases where some woman was shouting and walking around and saying, like, in France, she was saying, like, "Système totalitaire," and then, like, she was making up her own, like, weird story about it.
She's telling her own story.
And to me, that's also interesting. It's not about displacing authorship of the piece, but it's more about putting context with a very a directed context, and seeing how people interact and involve in that specific constraining context.
Right. Yeah. It's super interesting. It looks like a wildly distressing and what's the word? Well, powerful, definitely. I looked at it. It's very it's loud, and it doesn't just it's not like the trash compactor in Star Wars.
Yeah.
It comes down and then it slows and then it comes down.
Yeah, we're deploying different figures. There's some moments where it comes down slowly, so you're creating expectation because you're afraid, and then it goes really fast and everyone's shocked or surprised. So we're staging it that way. And
are the walls coming in as well?
No, I wish. The original version had 100
couldn't get
plates.
past the ethics board?
Well, that's another story. But
it's definitely a story we should talk about, I think. Getting past ethics boards.
Well, it's getting harder and harder. We're not in an era where like Chris Marker can shoot himself with a gun in the leg and make a performance out of it. Like you have a lot of ethics committee or like people being concerned, like that's dangerous or that's that would hurt some sensibilities. With this specific project, we had to make sure that there was engineers involved into proof stamping. Of course, I wouldn't have wanted to kill anyone by having like a huge metallic sheet onto people. But just for example, in Canada, we weren't able to bring down the plates up to lower than like I think 6 or 7 feet high. But in Europe, because they have different legislation and different ways of interacting with insurance companies that insure the venue and the shows, we were able to bring the thing down so that people were literally lying on their backs. Wow! So that was a context where we could go much further in the performance. But that was again in 2011. I don't think it would be a problem to do it again. I would love to do it again. But there are definitely some more limits, I feel.
Nowadays.
Yeah.
Has it ever really affected like the trajectory of your project?
You mean of our projects in general?
Yeah, maybe? Yeah. Like, have you ever been like, oh, can't do that because they say it's
So far, no, not really. But it's more like the logistic constraints that makes us think about that, because we're getting confronted with either financial elements or feasibility elements. Like shipping that thing across the seas costs like $10,000 for a container. So if there's no money, if we can't get the money to do it. And especially if it's only for 100 people, it's not a show for 5,000 people. It's not a theater play that we're doing for 20 evenings in a row that sells tickets to, an audience of 400 people. Mm-hmm. So it's all these problematics that are kind of peripheral to it, but in the end have a great impact on what you can and cannot do. Mm-hmm. And it feels like that's one of this discussion we're having with Etienne about this, is that it feels to us like there was more latitude a couple of years ago, like maybe 10 years ago, where we could think about these things and not even consider these aspects when we're emitting ideas and thinking about concepts and instantiations of these concepts. And right now we try not to internalize these things, but we kind of try to think about ways of circumventing these things, or keeping enabling us to keep doing what we like to do and what we want to do by making art, but still keep this into consideration so as to make the thing happen in the end.
Yeah, and figuring out. I mean, there's something to be said as well of having boundaries imposed on you how it affects your creativity. So yeah, I mean, I hope it never happens to you, that you don't get interfered with too heavily. How did you and Etienne start working together?
We met at while we were doing our master's degree at UQAM in communications. Etienne was coming back from a cinema background, and I was studying in communications and multimedia. So we met there. It didn't take time for us to, we were in the seminars, we were like maybe 4-5 persons who were actually reading all the texts and discussing them and, continuing the discussions later on around beers and bars and stuff. And so we started working on that. We were working as a collective with a little bit more people, and then it ended up being just the two of us.
Oh, like a big art collective?
Like a broader collective, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then you, when was your first installation or show project?
The first official show was in 2003.
Oh, okay, wow. Yeah. Because you've been busy. You've done. Yeah. You got to have something like over 20 installations that I've seen. I'm not the best at keeping track, and a lot of the piece, they're not documented. It took us a long time to start documenting properly what we were doing. And it used to be stuff on a MySpace page and stuff like that. Cool. And a lot of our performances were often one-offs. We'd do a show, we would be invited to a performance, art performance, Action Art Actuel, Action Art, right, for example. And we'd do one show, and then we'd use all the gear that was once and then repurpose it for another thing. So a garbage robot would become a torture machine for some other show. So it's well, that makes sense. I mean, of course you turn a garbage robot into that kind of machine.
I mean, you sanitize it first,
as you do,
and it's fine. But we had a lot of different contexts that we never had this plan of we will be making installation art, or we will be selling art, or we were going to make performance. We would just go and choose the means, like the mediums, or if it's a performance, if it's an installation, we wouldn't think in a categorized format. We would think, this is what we want to work on, like that type of idea. So what's the best suited technology to do that, and what's the best context for that? And so that led us into working in gallery settings and museum settings, in performance festival, old school 70s type of performance festivals, and then things that would be related to digital art and so on.
Yeah, and you've traveled. You've brought your places your installations all over the place as well.
Yeah, good exposure.
Yeah. Where do you go the most often overseas?
We now, in the recent years, we've been mostly active in Europe, in France. They
don't mind laying down on the floor.
No, that was fine. There's a good connection with Quebec and France. There's evidently a good connection for art, and now it's a little bit more difficult. But there used to be a lot of facilitating context, money-wise, to bring work over there too. So even one of our performance pieces, We Are the Progeny of Electricity, premiered in France, in Paris. And it was hard to make it in Montreal, to bring it back. Not hard to bring it back, but when we brought it back to Montreal, it was hard to find a way to present it in Montreal.
How so?
Because it's a piece that lies, I think that's what it is. It's because it's a piece that lies in between performance art, participatory theater, and digital art. So the people from digital art, I think it's only...
this is the one where everyone's wearing
a helmet with Pico projectors and all that. There's no show. There's only people interacting with one another. There's a show, but the show is actually your neighbor's face and vice versa. And so that piece kind of falls in between these categories. So we proposed it to people from theater festival of FTA and so on, FTA and so on, and it feels maybe too techy, too tech heavy for them, or too digital art, not live enough. And then the other festivals, which are not necessarily used to having language, spoken language in their shows, it feels too dramatic or too theater-ish or something like that.
So it's kind of a problem of being stuck between two mediums.
Yeah. I mean, we were able to do it in the Maison de la Culture in Montreal through a Conseil des Arts de Montréal en tournée program. And we were also able to do it in Quebec at Deux Mois Multi, because one of the purpose of that festival is to bring about, that's one of the only festivals in Quebec where I've seen theater play alongside AV performances, alongside installations, digital art installations, and so on.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about Montreal. There's so much space made available for every type of art, every type of medium.
Yeah, but that festival is actually in Quebec City. And in Montreal,
in Quebec City. Well, yeah. Quebec in general has a strong sensibility towards art and culture.
Yeah, but sometimes in Montreal it's more compartmentalized.
Is it? Where is it easier? Quebec?
It depends on the piece.
Yeah. Is it easier to get away with crazier stuff in Montreal or in Quebec? If it's, let's say it's a standard performance art piece. I mean, defined, it's not a theater piece, it's definitely performance art. You have a space, people come in.
Well, one of the things I could say to that, which doesn't necessarily answer your question directly, but
that's fine.
One of the things that we noticed is as soon as you go out of the big centers, the audience is much more willing and fun to work with, because it's as if there's not the same kind of limit or very analytical way of approaching the art. And it's, in Quebec City, we've done shows where it was a precursor show of the cinetos, metallic sheeting, where we were throwing a big metallic net, chicken wire net, onto people, and people just starting wrecking it and going for it, as opposed to other places in Montreal. Had we done this show, I think people would be more reserved, being conscious of others and so on.
And also, maybe as well in the cities, there's more of an academic approach to the art rather than just we're going to see an art show. Let's see what all this art's about.
Or there is an art show. Let's go, because there's not that many, so we want it.
Yeah, they're more. They know the scarcity of art shows like that. Mm-hmm. Do you think that plays a lot about it with in Montreal, that we're just so saturated with? Would you call it being saturated by art?
I don't know. I don't think I would be able to comment on that if we're saturated with art. I mean,
I wouldn't.
As a general statement, I would say the more art there is, the better.
The more art, the better.
So, and I don't know. I mean,
because the way I see it from the music perspective is that we could be saturated with music, but it's kind of a strange. It's a strange kind of music. We're saturated with recorded music.
Yeah.
So we back in the 40s and 50s, 60s, when music became a packageable thing, we sell records and stuff. That became our definition of music. that's what music was, listening to a record, listening to a CD, and then everybody sold these millions of records. And I think we've reached a point where it's such ease of use. You know, you stream anything, anytime you think of a song, you're listening to it in under 30 seconds. That now I think that's developing the live performance aspect of music again.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's what I was kind of thinking, that it's not as much as we would be saturated with art, but more saturated with specific types of art manifestation, like art events, maybe. And there would be more place for a diverse set of different art performances or venues and so on.
What kind of art? That's a weird question. What kind of art do you think is the most prevalent? It's a weird question. I mean, like, it's kind of hard to define art, of course, but is there like a golden age of like digital media art, or like robotic art, or like interactive art?
That's kind of a trick question, because you know, it's from what are you looking at? Like, what are we seeing? Like, what's the most prevalent art forms when you look at social media, for example? What do you see the most? Well, you're going to see anything that has great visual value to it. So, of course, you're not going to see performances that are played out in the dark. You know, in the early 2000s, if you would go to Electra Festival, you'd go, and there were evenings where you would just listen to electroacoustic music in the dark. So you sit there, there's no need for any visual or any, so that type of thing is not as frequent. I think there's still some with Acousma Festival happening, at least last time I went. But this is not prevalent because it doesn't, like, at least on the social media, you don't hear about these things as much because there's no image to apply to it.
It doesn't translate. It doesn't translate to a social media medium.
Yeah. So I would say in my specific domain, a lot of the AV performance that have all these required checklist elements, you know, some visual electronic gizmo that does some light or that moves or that something like very simple. Then you have the big feedback, the big visuals in the back, and then you have the performer manipulating the thing, and it's usually quite musical. You know, it's not. It's like a rhythmic musical, or you know.
Yeah.
So that's what I see as being more prevalent.
Yeah, kind of. I think a lot of what I've noticed with music and with different types of art is that it kind of has to embody that aspect of being there, of creating something that you can't just look up. You can't just look it up on your phone and get the idea of it. I think a lot of people are writing for that now. It's like being in the space, being in reality with their art. But I'm sure there's a lot of art that does translate onto the digital medium, like photography. And
of course.
Well, I guess you can call anything art. Yeah, anything. There's art mediums now that have developed because of social media and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like Vines or something.
Yeah.
That all comes about because of like, you know, maybe the way electronic music came about, because we had the technology to do it, and so now people start playing with it.
Exactly.
What do you think the craziest performance you ever, or art piece you ever did was? Like, what was the most chaotic to you?
Chaotic,
or like the most where you were it felt the most powerful to you?
Well, I think I would say Cinetos, the metallic singing was was a kind of a landmark for us, because it marked a place where we would be building, you know, small scale stuff, like low budget, small scale stuff, non-industrial, you know, it's all made by hand and everything. And then we get into this huge thing where there's all these problematics of, like, as I was saying, engineering problematics and crowd managing thing. And it's kind of, it was, to us, it was never seen before. You know, it's like we have to rent 12 1-ton jig motors and build a structure. So that was kind of very intense. And I wouldn't say it was chaotic because it had to be fully organized, but it was a great show to work on, and on all aspects, because you can't work on that in your garage or your studio or anything like that. We had to build parts of it and then work it in a lab that we would that we would be given access to, and then works part of it and then reset it somewhere else, and then finally have a place where we could set it all and work it out. And we've always had this thing with performance where we're trying to be live as much as possible, to play it like an instrument. So it's like I was saying earlier on, it's a space shaping device and a musical instrument. Mm-hmm. And so we're playing it. So a lot of it is scored, but most of it is live. And so anything can happen at that moment. Like I was telling you, if someone wants to keep standing up, what do? I have this guy who's controlling the motor. Squish him, continue. Okay, let's see how that goes, how that plays out. So there was like from the making or production aspect, that was kind of crazy for us. And for the playing, we're playing live and we're playing with the people's reaction all along. Mm-hmm. And it gave way to a lot of the crazy crowd interaction we had with that show. Same goes for the Nous sommes les fils et les filles de l'électricité. We are the progeny of electricity project, where, for example, in France, we kind of brought someone into a hypnosis state. That person started going like this, and then she woke up and she was repeating, because in the performance, people are repeating stuff. We've took some Scientology brain conditioning techniques and implemented them in the show, and it worked out super well with some person who was probably highly suggestible. Yeah, and she started repeating, and that was weird. And this is a moment where we're like, I'm looking at it and like, what do we do? Is she fine? It's a weird place. It's a weird place in a show when you're doing it, and everything seems to be very well under control. And two shows later, there's an hypnotist guy who comes here to see us, and he's like, "Well, are your kits for sale?" And he wanted us to sell him some of these kits so that he would use them in his own hypnosis sessions with clients or something like that. So these are kind of like little gems in what we do.
That's so cool. You had a hypnotist be like, "Hey man, how'd you figure that out?"
Yeah, because like a lot of the art is kind of off the world. It takes something separate from the world, and when you have real world people, like we're saying we want to put people into these states of like, for example, hallucinatory states and so on, but when it really happens, or when people who try to do that come to us and then they're like, "Hey, your thing is working well," it's cool. That's a feather
cool in your cap.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is really cool. I'm excited to know what you're working on next.
Right now, what are we working on? Well, I'm working on big robots for a dance show.
Cool.
This is like so much more problems again. I'm looking at power motors and like a bunch of crazy engineering problematics.
Now, when you say big robots, is it what I'm imagining in my mind?
I don't know what you're imagining, but it's like
giant machines walking around.
No, it's really like it's minimalist actually, but it's just they're kind of tall and they're pulling strings so that dancers can play around with the strings. Cool. And they're emitting like and all of that. So I'm trying to stray away from it. Still will have some kind of industrial automation robot type of feel, but I don't have industrial automation robots, but I'm trying to build structures that are strong enough to hold dancer's body for some movements. And I don't know, I'm trying to think. I've worked in dance as a video concept art video, as a videographer, sorry. In the past, but I was kind of dissatisfied not being able to have like that physical aspect. I mean, if you go see a dance show, you're going to see live bodies, whether they're human or robotic. You want to see these bodies move and evolve around the space. So this is one of the first occasions where I can actually do that. Have like physical structures move and interact with human bodies in the context of a dance show.
Is it going to be on a stage or in a space and the audience is down with the robot dancers?
Well, it's still under development, so we have yet to identify. Like I think it's probably going to be like a classic scène à l'italienne, like people looking at it. We had all sorts of we studied also of different configuration, but I think it's going to be more classical, like standard. But because we're working also from creating specific images, and there's like laser projection and all that. It's with a bunch of other people that we're working on that. And with Project EVA, we have a couple of new projects on the way. We're going further from what we already started doing with Cortège, with the mobile app. We're still into, kind of mind control or behavior-inducing art pieces where people are being directed to act in specific ways. I think we're not done with this. Like a lot of the work we've been doing in the past were very physical and very somatic, but in a physical way, so that your interaction with the art installation or the performance is mediated through technology and your body. And with we are the Projet EVA Electricity, with Cortège, all of this is slowly moving towards the mind control aspect of it, so that we're using audio commands to talk to people and have people have internalized behaviors that are not their own, or that are not part of their own intent, but part of our intent, or part of the stage intent of very artificial intelligence mechanism. So we're gonna work on a project that uses that approaches that theme, and we also want to produce another installation because it's just fun to do. That has more sound, but it's another big physical structure that makes sound and that drips oil and stuff like that.
Ooh. How do you source your sound? Are either of you musical or musicians?
Yes. Etienne did I think he was doing, how do you say that? Un corps français?
French horn?
Yeah, he was doing that in high school, I think. He did some piano. I'm actually, right now, I'm taking piano lessons, classical piano lessons. I'm going back to the non-digital, I have a real piano and I'm trying to play some piano. I'm not that good yet.
Analog.
Yeah, I'm going into a very romantic phase of romantic painting, piano,
nice.
like Debussy, and post like Chopin and
nice.
And Debussy, and all of that. And so, I used to play bass as a teen for a while. So we have like this music sensibility. I wouldn't say this music very trained musician background, and we've been making most of our sounds on our own. So. Either using computers or mostly using computers most of the time. So that's how we work.
Like Ableton or Pro Tools or something?
No, Maximus P.
Oh, and Max.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a whole other world that I'm afraid to even open the box to.
In 2005, I coded all my step sequencers. I did a grime and dubstep act using a robotic pneumatic doll that would play a real drum.
Oh, cool.
So there was a doll that was playing the drums, and I was accompanying the doll on tour doing synths and stuff like that, like heavy synths, not bro step, but like old school dubstep, when it was nice to listen to that. And you weren't afraid to say that you would be listening to that?
Yeah. Like, I listen to dubstep.
You can't say that anymore.
I don't care who knows.
Yeah, it's like Dungeons and Dragons. And at that point, I don't think Ableton was very much developed or used. And I had coded all my stuff. And then some guy I was playing music with came to me and said like, "Oh, I'm using Ableton Live." And he showed it to me. And I was like, "Fuck. Damn, I just spent like a year coding all my software to do like this proper live control stuff." And then all of this was happening. I don't know if it's ego or being lazy, but I'm not learning that. I'm continuing into Maximus P. So this is a lot of what we're doing. For other types of source or like material building in music, one of the things we did was we took part into this project made by the Conseil des Arts de Montréal, which was called, at that time it was called Libre comme l'art. So it's a program where you get artist residencies in high schools. So we work with a high school in Côte-Saint-Luc. And essentially what we did, we developed a graphic notation system where we would project onto a big screen some like visual structures that would inform a group of students. I think there were 50 students or so that were actually a harmony. So they were playing all like wind instruments and all of that. So basically the idea was to control these guys using our little MIDI controllers that would change the graphic notation system live, and the guys would play. But the thing is that we didn't have them play notes or anything. It was like either sustained notes, and when we introduced them to what we were trying to do, we showed them, for example, the Godzilla movie intro, because they all know it. And in Godzilla, actually, the trailer is a Ligeti track, so people going a Ligeti choir, typical. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, do you know how this is made? And we showed a Ligeti, like a video of a choir performing Ligeti, and everyone going, whoa, and this is what we're going to do with you guys, but with your instruments. So essentially they were playing the same note, but with different amplitude or moving for a pan and everything. So we were controlling them. They would blow just wind into an instrument, and we recorded all these sessions. And that gave us a lot of material that came from a very analog background to later on recompose that and use whatever sound sampling and not sound sampling, but sound editing software. Mm-hmm. So it's always like, it really depends, for example, what I was describing in L'Objet d'Internet, like the sound is mostly live and it's a driver making vibrations so it's not, we're never approaching it the exact same way. It's really dependent on the project.
Right. As it always should be.
Well, for us, it works well to do it like that.
Yeah. Because in everything I've seen of yours, unfortunately, I've never actually been to I'll have to get to know where I can go see some. Because I want to hallucinate in the spinning mirrors too.
Côte des Neiges, Maison de la Culture Côte des Neiges this summer.
Great.
In June.
Perfect. But it seems like sound is always present and heavily involved.
Yeah.
Then that makes sense. If you're looking for people to have it like a totally immersed, I'm right here moment.
Yeah, of course.
Get all those senses.
Yeah, of course. And we like to, I was going to say it badly, but we like to fuck it up. I mean, we like to disconnect perceptual channels. Mm-hmm. So whether it's visual, auditory, physical sensation. So we like to take these things and disconnect them and then reassemble them in different ways so that you get this disruption, this non-synchronicity of all these information that come through these various channels. And this creates a discomforting, or at least, a discomforting emotion or sensation to the person that makes them being very much like attentive to what is happening. And then it's like we're on brouille les cartes là. We're making it very messy, and then we can shoot whatever we want after that.
Yeah. Do you think people are more susceptible to that always, like they're always connected? They're always, all these streams of information are just constantly coming at them, that when you interrupt it or scramble it, it's like people aren't ready for that. It's like when your phone dies, you're like, what do I do now?
I think it's getting more and more difficult because we're so, like, just like the brain interruption mechanism, we're so used to being interrupted more and more. It doesn't mean we're working efficiently with that, but we're being constantly interrupted. Like you're looking at a phone while someone's talking to you. And, like just today I was working, and every 10 minutes I was receiving a new email that prompted me to answer very rapidly because I'm securing some touring thing. Where people are getting more used to it. So it's just about, for us, it's about finding strategies to, find still ways to put people, for example, like find new ways to put people into situations that are kind of novel. And they don't have to be historically novel. They have to be novel in to a very recent context. For example, in a show, the show where people are talking to one another and looking at each other, you never go to a show where you look at someone's eyes for 30 minutes.
Never.
In their eyes. But that's what people are doing. So this is creating some kind of very intimate, yet very strange because of all the projection. It creates this link with another human that we're not used to having anymore. Or maybe we don't have that.
Ever. Yeah.
Yeah. And also people are holding hands and closing their eyes and breathing heavily. So that's like a wellness criticism or whatever.
Yeah.
But people, if you go into a digital art performance or festival, like you're not used to like hold your neighbor's hands. So this becomes kind of again playing with intimacy and proximity with other people. Mm-hmm. So that's a good strategy to again place the people in a not so comfortable space and think about their experience at that time.
Yeah, and that novelty is. Well, you mentioned that's the one with the hypnotist, right? The hypnotist came up and said he wanted your secrets or your machinery. But I've heard hypnotists talk about how that's how they hack people's consciousness. Is they do just slight. They try and find things that are habitual and just do something slightly different. So they'll reach for a handshake and then just turn their hand for a second, and it puts people into this paralyzed shark state where they become super suggestible. Yeah, it's like humans are really bad at multitasking, you know. So it's like when if someone's on the phone, you can see these videos online. If someone's on the cell phone, there's all these videos of people just going up and giving them something like a birthday cake or like some ridiculous thing, and they don't even say anything. They just take it. And they can't do two things at once. Yeah, and it's a strategy that's often used in art as well. Like I don't know what the English term would be for détournement. It's like hacking, or you know. Yeah, like like you take something that's very habitual. Yeah, circumnavigate. But you're taking something that's very that people are very habituated to, and then you just displace it a little bit, and then it becomes something you pay much more attention to. And you know, that's a strategy that's often used. Yeah, that's art. That's art in a way. It's one definition of art. Yeah. Well, it could be a means to make an art. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah. And it might not get you there. It might. The intention might not be enough. In some cases. Well, all your stuff is super, super cool. Thank you. And it's good to see. You know, because I think it definitely installation art. Performance art, these experiences, these places you can go to experience things in a different way is coming up. I see it more and more every day, and I think it's such a perfect city here for it because there's a lot of people that like to think differently in Montreal. I would hope so. Oh yeah, I would hope so. Yeah. Yeah, I have faith. So super cool. And you said your next installation is in June? The next one. Yeah, the next, like we're going to Europe with it in a week or so, and then it's coming back rush to be at La Maison de la Culture Côte des Neiges. How long does it take to move these things? Not so long. I mean, not anymore. Not anymore. Like it's properly packaged into like a big like shipping crates. Shipping crates that I've built. Wow. We do everything. Yeah, it's crazy. Like artist entrepreneur. I mean, but so we pack them and we ship them. It's just like it's more like it's not so bad because now it fits into planes, so we can ship them fast. Good. It doesn't have to go through a big boat. On a big sea can, and then you're waiting for weeks and weeks. Yeah, hoping it's not going. With all the art at the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. So that's coming back. So you're going in a week, and then you're going to be there for how long? We're going there for 10 days, 14 days, and then we're coming back here, but we're going back again in May. So we have a show in April and 1 or 2 shows in May, and then back in June in Montreal, and then possibly to Toronto. Oh wow, busy. An itinerant artist. This time is particularly busy, which is good. It's kind of a makeup for last year, because last year was kind of a lot of things that did not happen, especially because of logistic reasons. And this year is catching up. So you're back, guns a-blazing. I'm happy about it. Yes. Good. Well, how can people find you on the old interweb? Well, you can find us if you Google Projet EVA, EVA. So, or it's
Projet PROJET-EVA.org.
EVA, and the website's cool. It's got a bunch of your stuff up, and you guys have any Instagram, Twitter, anything like that?
Yeah, we kind of suck at it, but we have.
Me too.
We're still on there.
Yeah.
But I think the last Instagram post, we're kind of re-hashtagging now. So the hashtag Projet EVA and at Projet EVA.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I urge people to go check you out. Coming to a city near you,
All right.
this one soon. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks
Awesome.
for having me.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
All right.
Until the next time. Thanks, everybody. All right. Yeah, man, art. What a world.
Yeah.